I think the debate between tents over hammocks has gone on long enough. There is a clear winner. Matty's going to give you guys 5 reasons why the hammock is a far superior choice for your backpacking trips. Now, over the last couple of years, I have gotten into hammock camping and I have fallen head over heels in love with it. I am now an avid hammock camper. I will take my hammock out about 95% of the time if given the choice. Now, I do say if given the choice. I do realize that there are some areas that we tend to go backpacking where hammocks just simply aren't going to work. You just may not have trees. Obviously, this is going to be a video where I talk about why hammocks are superior to tents, but it does come with a little bit of a caveat. You do have to do a little bit of research beforehand when you're going out and you're deciding to take a hammock with you out on a backpacking trip. I know there's many areas up here in the Canadian Rockies, especially in our national parks, that just don't allow hammocks. So like I mentioned, a little bit of research before you go out on your trip is definitely going to help you out if you are looking at getting yourself a hammock. But like I said at the start, we are going to talk 5 reasons why the hammock is superior to a tent. Now, reason number 1 may be a little bit of a controversial one, because I've seen on many other people's YouTube videos and in Facebook groups, the tent-loving crowd always tends to say that tents are easier to set up than hammocks, and myself, I'm going to completely disagree with that. Now, over the last 20 years of backpacking, I have seen so many people struggle with getting a proper pitch with their tent, be it a freestanding tent, and even more so now as more people are transitioning into the ultralight realm and getting into the non-freestanding tents and the trekking pole tents. People tend to struggle all the time getting a proper pitch with their tent. And when people get into hammocks, yes, there is a little bit of a learning curve when you get into hammocks, but there are a couple tricks that make setting up a hammock super easy. And when I go on backpacking trips with my friends, almost all of my friends are into tent camping. And when we get to camp, we're getting our shelter set up. I am almost always the first person to have my hammock set up, and I've got it set up before the people with their tents have got their tents set up. And a lot of my friends have had their specific tents for years longer than I've had my hammock. And I'm still able to get my hammock set up a little bit quicker than them. And it just comes down to a couple little simple tricks. And the biggest one is just finding the right tree selection. The very first thing I do is I try and find a couple trees that are nicely spaced out. I try and give myself about 15 to 16 paces in between the trees. So that's just walking with kind of like toe to heel, and just getting 15 steps in between those trees. I find that kind of gives me the optimal distance between the 2 trees for where I want to set up my hammock. And then it just comes down to the height of my tree straps. Now, the big trick with hammocks, and a lot of people seem to really struggle with this one, is just simply getting the head end of your hammock about 1 foot to 8 inches lower than the foot end of your hammock. So when I set my tree strap, I decide which side I want my head end to go, and I just wrap this tree strap for my head end at eye level. And then when I go to wrap the tree strap for my foot end, I set it as high as my hands can reach. And that tends to work out for me every single time. And then once you've got your tree straps up, it's just getting the tension set. And by that time, you're going to sit there and you're going to watch all the people with the freestanding tents struggle to get that perfect pitch. And you're going to be sitting back, relaxing and lounging, watching them do it. And a little bit of a bonus as well is getting into hammock camping. Setup in inclement weather tends to be far superior than setting up a tent in inclement weather, because you can very easily pitch your tarp up and have a nice dry spot to set up your hammock and organize all your gear while all the other people are sitting there out in the rain getting their tent set up. So just another reason why hammocks are far superior, setting up in inclement weather. And overall setup, I find in a hammock is much easier than setting up a tent. As we dive into number 2, I'm going to pull up my favorite hammock. In this bag here is my Dream Hammock Raven. And the reason that my Dream Hammock Raven is relevant for tip number 2 is because we're going to talk about customization. Now, to me, one of the coolest parts about hammock camping is just how customizable your hammock setups can be. And that comes down to the cottage vendors as well as the DIY aspect. So when I talk about customization in terms of cottage vendors, that just comes down to all the various different options you can get when selecting your hammock. When it comes to customization, there is no better place to shop than with Dream Hammock. They have the largest selection of fabrics and the most customization options for you when you get your hammock. When it comes to getting your custom hammock, you can pick the color, you can pick the different fabrics you want, you can pick what color you want your continuous loops to be. And companies like Dream Hammock even offer stitching colors. So if you want to have a blue hammock with red stitching or white stitching, you can even fire that off to them and they will get that done for you. The customization options on these hammocks are almost limitless. I am always blown away at the different innovations that many of these cottage vendors are coming out with, and it just seems like it never ends, and hammocks are just becoming more and more customizable as we go. And as I also mentioned, the DIY aspect. Now, depending on how you are with a sewing machine, there are many people out there who just build their own hammocks, and they sew their own hammocks, and they sew bug nets onto their hammocks. Myself, I'm not much of a seamstress, but I do go and I make all my different suspension components, be it my whoopee sling suspensions or the different continuous loops that I have hanging off the end of my hammock. Just another reason why hammocks are far superior. Just the customization options make them that much cooler than tents. Number 3, we're going to talk about condensation. Now, condensation tends to plague people out on backpacking trips, especially when it's raining and you're dealing with humid conditions. You're going to get condensation on the inside of your rain fly or the inside of your tarp if you're out hammock camping. Now, I have found over the last couple of years that it is significantly easier to reduce condensation in my hammock than it ever was when it came to tent camping. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you're elevated off the ground. So when you've got your tarp pitched down, you've just got that much more airflow whipping underneath you. And if you've got doors on the end of your tarp, you can open those up. If you don't have doors on your tarp, you're going to get tons of airflow whipping through, and you're not going to have any condensation on the underside of that tarp. Number 4, we're going to talk about warmth, and I'm specifically going to talk from my experience winter camping, and that comes from backpacking with a tent and backpacking with a hammock in the wintertime. And the reason why that's the most relevant when it comes to talking about warmth is I have found with a sufficiently rated sleep system for ground sleeping and for hammock camping, the hammock is just significantly warmer. Now, if you guys have ever climbed inside of a hammock with a properly fitted underquilt, you guys will understand and you will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that you climb in a hammock with an underquilt, you feel the heat radiating into your back. Now, I know a lot of people say that, and before I got into hammock camping, I had heard that phrase and I heard people talk about it, and I never fully understood it until the first time I climbed inside my buddy Devin's hammock and laid down with his underquilt and felt that warmth radiating up into my back. It was absolutely amazing, and to me, there is nothing that beats that feeling. Now, that's just something you're not going to feel when it comes to ground camping. Over the years, I have tried out some of the most expensive cold rated sleeping pads out there on the market, and yeah, they will keep you warm overnight, but you just don't feel that warmth underneath you. Just the advantages of a hammock with an underquilt when it comes to cold weather sleeping is the underquilt just hugs completely around you, and then your top quilt goes over top of you, and you're wrapped in a cocoon of warmth. Just nothing beats it. I am really sorry for all of you guys sleeping on the ground, living that peasant life. You guys just don't understand the absolute warm hug that you're getting all night sleeping in a hammock with an underquilt. If you get a chance to try it out, I guarantee you guys are going to turn yourselves into hammock campers. Hammocks with an underquilt, you cannot beat it. Now, going into reason number 5 why hammocks are far superior to tents. It's weird to call it reason number 5 because to me, this is simply the number 1 reason why a hammock is going to beat a tent and why I'm going to take a hammock over a tent every single time if given the option, and that is just simply overall comfort. After about 15 years backpacking, sleeping on the ground, and trying out different air pads and different foam pads, and I honestly never had a full, complete night's sleep out in the backcountry. As soon as I got into hammock camping, that completely changed. I don't know what it is, but almost everybody who sleeps in a hammock will tell you there is absolutely nothing that beats the comfort and the sleep quality that you are going to get from climbing inside a hammock and having to sleep inside a hammock. To me, it's just the total package of ridiculous comfort. Like I mentioned before, the warmth from the underquilt coming up underneath you. I absolutely love the experience of sleeping in a hammock. And for myself, I find once I fall asleep, the only thing that is waking me up in the middle of the night is my bladder when I wake up and I inevitably have to go pee. Like I said, hands down, the number 1 reason why a hammock is far superior to a tent is comfort and the quality of sleep that you are going to get sleeping in a hammock over a tent. I don't care what tent you're in. I don't care what sleeping pad you're using. I don't care what sleeping bag. I don't care what top quilt you're using. When it comes to sleeping on the ground, there is no way that you are going to be as comfortable as curled up, sleeping in a hammock, living amongst the trees, getting off the ground, getting out of that peasant life, getting up in the trees, sleeping like a king, and even being a weight-conscious backpacker and driving myself towards that ultralight backpacking gear loadout, I will take the little bit of a weight penalty and carry the little bit of extra weight because, yes, a hammock setup will always be a little bit heavier than a tent setup, but for me, the comfort of sleeping in a hammock far outweighs the small weight penalty when it comes to carrying a hammock over a tent. And that's why the #1 reason that hammock is far superior to a tent is comfort. Now, like I just mentioned, I am a very weight conscious backpacker, and I'm into carrying less weight on my back, and I'm very much geared towards getting towards that ultralight backpacking gear loadout. And if that is something that you were looking at doing, I've got an entire playlist full of weight saving backpacking tips, and I'll fire it right here for you. So we're done with this video. Find a video in that playlist. I'll see you over there. As always, I'm Matty. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.